Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women Talking Money podcast. My name is Gretchen from Magenta Financial Planning, and today I'm joined by Rebecca Shannon. Rebecca owns a company called Complement Coaching, offering dynamic coaching that helps forward thinkers reach their goals, remaining mindful, intuitive, and curious. Rebecca describes herself as the queen of heart-led leadership. Rebecca has over 30 years worth of experience in operations, leadership development, project management and training to deliver transformative coaching. Her coaching programs aim to help people with all aspects of their lives, private as well as corporate. And as well as running the coaching business, she's co-authored the book, A Journey of Riches, is a guest speaker and a self-proclaimed miracle maker. Rebecca believes in an approach that not only offers kindness and empathy, but also a healthy dose of forthright honesty. So I look forward to our conversation today and welcome Rebecca and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, hi Gretchen, it's lovely to be here. And I always love it when you hear the introduction that people share, because it's great to hear back. You don't hear it yourself all the time, so it's really wonderful to hear it all together like that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's accent. Oh, thank you. But that's what quite a few people say. They're like, "Wow, yeah, I don't not used to hearing this about myself." So that's great. So, Rebecca, do you want to just tell us a little bit more, though? I always like to give everybody the opportunity to just tell them a little bit more about what you're up to and what's important to you in your work. So, over to you for a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yes, a lot of it's said in the introduction, but really that sort of heart-led leadership that you touched upon is really where my passion is, and it's where my work is through the coaching practice that I have, is working with leaders to really lead from their heart, and to create everything they want in their world. You know, I very much believe in a world that we get to create it exactly how we want it to be. We've lived, and I've lived a lot of my life thinking that life happens to us. So really encouraging people to see that they can step up into their own leadership, whether that's in actual leadership roles or just in their own lives and businesses, and create everything they want, which includes financial freedom, which I know is very much the topic about today. So it can be about finances, it can be about emotional freedom, and it can be about creating a world that we love, and a life that we love, which so many of us kind of go through life not really loving where we're at. So that's really where my passion comes from. So I've got vast experience within various different backgrounds, operations, management, which has all led me to coaching. Coaching is something that's been a thread through all of those things. I've very much shown up with my teams and coached people since I was very young. And then in the last 7 to 8 years, decided that that's where I wanted to put all my time and attention. I'm a single mum of 3 boys. So, financial independence has been really important to me during that time. Coming out of a marriage and going through all the financial fun of divorce and separation, to a place where I create financial freedom through the work that I do and create the life that I love living. So yeah, there's a little bit more flavour to my introduction.
Fab. And we're aligned in many things, I feel, in both branding colours, which has repeated itself the couple of times that I've seen you, and also, yeah, just like trying to encourage people to live the life that they really would like to. And I guess there's 2 elements to that, isn't there? The coaching side, and including financial coaching, and then the kind of practicality of like how are the resources going to be managed to make sure that you can do that. So I think, yeah, we've got quite a few overlaps in the way that we, our day to day and talking to people. So yeah, I've really enjoyed learning about what you're up to. So yeah.
Likewise.
So today, though, the tables are turned slightly. I'm not going to do any financial coaching online, but certainly about being just open, about talking about money, which people really, we do struggle with. It's not something that comes easy. So many sort of built-in social taboos that around talking about money, especially in a kind of broader context, maybe closer to home, but anything else is quite difficult. So tell me a little bit, we always want to sort of talk about a little bit, about how you learned about money, or how you what you heard about money growing up. So can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So My background, so as a child, when I was younger, my father was personnel director of Tesco's, which was a very big job, very well paid job. So for the first ten years of my life, money wasn't an issue because there was money around. We lived a very affluent life. We had everything that we wanted. Um, and I don't remember at that time money really being discussed very much at all, but it was present because we could just do what we wanted. We lived in a very nice home in Cambridgeshire, and we lived a great life. My mum also worked, so she was more of an entrepreneur. That's probably where I get my entrepreneurship from. So she was an antiques dealer, and she ran a bookshop. So her sort of way that she brought money into the business worked around us as children as well. So she was a working mum, and she always had like a bookshop next to our house or an antique shop, and so money came in that way as well. So I had sort of the very corporate world of money, and then also the very entrepreneurial side of it as well, where the money was sort of flowing in a different way and less structured. Get to year 10 of my life. I've got an older brother and an older sister as well. So they were sort of 12 and 16 at the time. My dad suddenly got made redundant from his very high powered job. It was during the Thatcher years when they decided that young people were the only people who knew anything about business. So anyone over the age of about 45 was redundant, basically. And that was my father. So suddenly we went from having everything to literally having nothing. I mean, I'm sure there was a payout, but the shift in money stories at that time was quite significant because suddenly it became very fearful. In a time where there was a lot of financial insecurity in the world generally, and there was this backdrop of once you get to a certain age, you're not really productive anymore. My dad was 49 when he got made redundant, so 49, 50, which at the time it was like past that age, you're on the, you're done really. And so the money story became very present. And we went from literally living a very luxurious life in Cambridgeshire to then we moved to West Wales, which was a fantastic shift in lifestyle actually for all of us. But at the time was driven by that's all we could do. We couldn't afford to stay where we were unless Dad got another job, which he was struggling to do. So the way that we dealt with that is we sold everything up, moved to West Wales, completely different lifestyle. And from that point on, money was always an issue. We had school dinners paid for. We never had very much money. My mum was still running businesses. My dad was running businesses, but it became an ever-present conversation. And it was, the money stories we picked up is, you have to work hard to get money. Once you've got money, hold on to it because you never know what might happen. My mum and dad had very different views of money. Like my mum had come from a very poor background in East End of London. So she had a very scarcity mindset around money. My dad had come from a very affluent background in, oh God, I can't remember the name, Liverpool, but the posh part of Liverpool, which I can't remember what the name of it is. So he was very relaxed about money. So you had this real, even though he didn't have money coming in, he was very relaxed about it. He didn't really have that fear factor. My mum, on the other hand, was terrified. A real shift, which I don't think at the time I recognised, but as I look back now and I'm learning more about, coaching and wealth management and money stories and all those things, I can see how that had an impact. So as a family, money was always talked about as in not being there, basically, and that we really had to work hard for it. So I started working when I was 13. My brother was working when he was 13. We were always bringing money into the household, and which was great, actually, because we learned to manage money from a very early age. But I had a story that to have money, I had to work very hard for it. And underlying that, there was also a story, which again, I didn't really see at the time, but I can see now, that money was, I wouldn't go as far as to say evil, but people who had money weren't nice people. So if you had a lot of money, there was this story that went along that meant you weren't a very nice person. So in my mind, I started to make those distinctions. Have to work hard for money, and people who have a lot of money either probably haven't worked hard for it and were kind of gifted it from nowhere, or they're just not very nice people. And that money was not going to bring equal happiness. So those were the kind of stories that I was growing up with. Not very conscious at the time, but now I can see those.
Yeah. And interesting, as you say, just such a difference from your kind of younger years to then sort of from 10 up, like being a completely different shift. I mean, shift of significant geography and different type of world. And West Wales and Cambridgeshire are very, very different. But interesting that you said that your dad's, so his money kind of habit, it was a little bit freer than your mum's. Your mum's was a lot more kind of, scarcity or more security focused, I guess. But that it didn't seem to shift, even though he, was at this point then where he's not, making regular income or in the same way that he was. So it seems like then your mum kind of went, right, we're nailing down on this then, because then all the other messaging was kind of feels like it might have been led quite a lot by her kind of her habits.
Yes. I mean, she became the stronger. I think she'd always been the stronger voice, if I'm honest. But she became the stronger voice there. What we didn't realise then that became apparent later on is my dad had Alzheimer's, and if I look back, I think the slow. He probably had quite early onset Alzheimer's,
right?
And actually, I think a lot of the laid back and a lot of the not really getting too involved in it was actually because his capacity was starting to disappear even then. And what happened over time was that mum's fear around it started to infiltrate him, but he didn't know what to do with it because he'd never had that before. So it became, this is a whole other story, but it became even amplified, even when there was money. And actually, one of the things that I realised looking back is that we never went without, really. We were always provided for. Yes, we had a period of time where, we got free school dinners and all that sort of thing. But both my brother and I went to university and we funded that. The grants were different way back when I went to university than they are now. Neither my brother and I came out with massive amounts of debt. We both had learned how to work and earn money before we went to university. So we funded pretty much ourselves through that. And actually, mum and dad, their house they owned in Wales, they sold part of it many years later, which created wealth for them, which meant they could have an easier life. When my father was ill, we were lucky, we were blessed. His care was taken care of. And my mum still owns a lovely property in West Wales. So all those fears about us never having enough money, there was always enough there. And yes, my mum worked hard for it, but we never went without, right? I would have loved my mum to have had an easier ride with it along the way, as to feel that she didn't have to fight quite so hard for it. And that's something that I've had to work on in my life. And certainly in the last few years of being in the coaching world is let go of some of those fears and stories around how hard I have to work to get money. And how once I've got it, that the best thing to do with it is let it flow in and out really easily to create more rather than hanging on to it and worrying that it's going to get taken away from me.
I think some of that is partly, the position that you're in. And is that we talk about these things, we know that there are money stories that we have to address, maybe some hurdles we have to climb, or some habits we have to reverse, or we have to challenge ourselves on those habits that are so ingrained from our family money story. I think that it's really interesting that it's not the first time that it's come up, but that if we can be aware of it, which is what you've done, is actually recognize it in yourself, because it is passed down. And it's so, what is it, that by the age of 7, most of those habits are already formed. So really, really interesting to kind of, and I hope that everyone listening over the various episodes I've talked about it has started to think about their money story a little bit more, so that we can challenge those things.
Because money stories is one part of, a lot of the work that I do. And obviously, there are experts who work in particular areas, as you do in finances, right? But a lot of the work I do with people is around, most of what happens is run by our subconscious. We're not consciously choosing these things. There are these rackets that are running the show deep in our subconscious that we've learned as we've gone along, through conditioning, through stories that we've heard, family values. And one of the most powerful things, and I'm sure you do this in these podcasts, but also in the work you do with people, is just to, as you say, become aware of them and get them out so that we can then look at them and then go, okay, this is what's running the show here. So now I can see that and I've got awareness of it. Now I can do something about that, which might mean, better budgeting tools or whatever. It might just mean just being aware of, oh, okay, the reason I've never had money in the past isn't because I can't make money. It's because I have a story that I can't hold on to money, or that if I have money, it means something. So now we're working with the fact rather than the actual thing that's running the show, rather than the symptoms, if you like, which could be, I've never had any money. Well, actually, if we then get to this little thing inside of us that's driving that and bring some awareness to it, we shift that and suddenly money isn't an issue anymore, not in the way that it was before. So this is a really, big part of the work that you do with people and that I do with people. It's like you say, just bringing it out and putting it on the table and going, okay, now I can see it. Now I can do something about it. And that's really powerful, whether it's a money story, a love story, work story, anything. It's out there and now we can work with it.
And there are definitely some repetitive patterns, like in a lot of people around. You mentioned a couple of times, like, we've got to work hard for money, and money doesn't come easy. Another one very often that we talk about is, all debt is bad. I don't want to be in any debt. And then all of those things sometimes can lean into this scarcity kind of mindset, which means we don't take the opportunities that we could do. And maybe we miss out on things, and balancing that life, the life that we want, which is something that you're trying, to achieve so hard with your coaching work,
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned in this that your brother and you, worked before you went to uni. I'm interested to know, like, what job you had. I mean, it was easier to get a job as a teenager at that point, but what was it that you were doing?
So I had so many jobs when I was young. So my first one, I live near a place called Kenarth in West Wales, which is a beautiful falls, Kenarth Falls, beautiful spot. The Timotei advert was filmed there back in the day, where she washed her hair in the water.
Yeah.
And my mum had an antique shop there when we were in West Wales, and so she was going there, regularly. So I started going with her. Just round the corner, next to the falls, there was a pub, and the pub had a little shop next to it, which I can't remember. I think it was the Three Compasses. I can't remember now. Anyway, a little shop that sold knickknacks, touristy knickknacks, and bits and bobs. And I got a job in there, working at the weekends and during holidays. And I'd either go there with my mum when she was there working, or I'd cycle, which was about a 3 or 4 mile cycle ride. And you're going to ask me how much I got paid. I cannot even tell you. I can't even remember. But it seemed like an absolute fortune at the time, and I saved it up. So what I did was, I worked all the hours that I could, holidays and weekends, and I'd put we used to get it in cash in a little brown envelope with the amount on there and my name on it, and I used to put it aside. And every season, my mum and I would go to, and my dad would go to Swansea, which was our nearest city that had any kind of shops in it. And we'd go, spring, summer, autumn and winter, and I'd buy my clothes. So my mum and dad, because money wasn't, readily available to them at that time, they would buy all my school clothes and some basic coat and shoes and what have you. And then my money from my earnings would be, I'd go with £200-300 in my hands, which in those days was a lot of money, and I'd buy my summer outfit or my winter outfit or whatever it was I wanted when I was younger. As I got older, it went to going out and cars and things like that. But yeah, that was my very first job. The one that
do you remember that, whether there was a discussion about the fact that you were going to save it, or do you think that was quite do you remember whether your mum said, so if you're making that, then save that for later? Or
I'm trying to think. I think we did have a kind of save mentality, certainly from when we were younger, when money wasn't so much of an issue. It was, we bought things when we could afford them. So there was an element of, you can buy that when you've got the money. There wasn't such an idea then of credit generally, but certainly in our family, there wasn't that idea of, well, just buy it anyway and we'll worry about it later. So yes, I think it was quite a habit that I'd got from when I was young, that, I kept my pennies, I kept my pocket money. And then when I started earning it myself, it just naturally became that I would save it up for those trips. And there wasn't a lot to spend money on in between, to be fair, back in the day. There wasn't Amazon and all the online shops. So I had no other way of spending it, really. So it was quite natural to save it and do it that way. It wasn't longer term saving, though. There wasn't any, like, I'm going to save this for, my future. It was literally, I'm going to save this till I go shopping. Then I literally spend it all, and then I start saving again for the next one, from what I remember. It's a few years ago.
For an item or
Yes,
something. Yeah. And what about now? Do you have a specific budgeting? You mentioned a bit about budgeting and how that is important for people, and do you have a budgeting system you use now with running the business as well?
Running the business. I mean, I'm very much an outsourced person. So I learned when I started my business that actually there are parts of my business and parts of my world that I'm not particularly not good at, because I am good at them. They're not the things that light me up. They're not my sweet spot. And it's very much what I coach people on as well, is I recognize that, yes, I could do my own budgeting, and yes, I could do my own tax returns and all of that, but it takes time away from what I'm really good at, which is showing up and coaching people. So very early on in my business, I've always had people around me to support me with that. So I have a full-time accountant, well, not full-time accountant, I have an accountant who manages all of my business for me. And she helps me plan and manage not just the money coming in and out. So she does all of the returns and the tax and all of that, but also we have strategic reviews around what do I want to achieve for this year in the business and what does that look like. And she's very good at telling me off for spending money when I shouldn't. And also pointing me in the direction of when I could be spending money and I'm not. So, it would be really good. You've got some money in the business now. Is there anything you would like to invest in? So that for me has been really helpful. In my private world, as it's been quite, I can't think of the right word. I got divorced and separated and divorced in the last 8 years. And the money story came up again, because in divorce, it tends to. So there was a lot of connecting money with my worth in that separation. So it's not been the easiest journey with money for me over the last few years. And as with a lot of us as coaches, we are great at coaching other people, but it doesn't always mean we're great at coaching ourselves. So it's not been an easy ride. I'm much better at it now than I have been before. I think I've always been good at budgeting. I think for me, what's been interesting over the last few years is I went from having to budget, like having to, because there was nothing left in the bank to pay for anything. So, and being a bit like my mum, very fearful of money, coming from a very scarcity mindset, and being very controlling with it, which is a form of budgeting, but it wasn't one that really gave me the life that I love and enjoyment and joy around my life. And then over the time, I've gone probably too far the other way, just like, yay, I've got money. It can just flow in and out really easily, to now where I am right now, I think, which is actually, right, okay, I've experienced both extremes here. And I think that's part of the fun I talk to my clients around, is we can experiment with stuff. We can kind of test our edges. What does it feel like to be really in control of our money? And what does it feel like to just really not be in control? Because what you do by experimenting is you find where your sweet spot is. And that's kind of where I am right now, I think, with my both the business and financially. And I'm having to start again a little bit as a 50-year-old single mum. I'm having, I don't have a mortgage right now, because coming out of selling the home, I wasn't in a position to get a mortgage. And I chose, and it was a choice, I could have got a mortgage. I chose to just go down the renting market for a while, because actually it gives me freedom. And it means that I can afford a house that I really want to live in, that I love, that I couldn't get as a mortgage. So I made a choice, which to me is another way of experimenting with my edges here, because we're very much conditioned in the UK that we have to have a mortgage, right? And we have to own a house. But actually, I was going to put myself in a very financially tight situation last year when the interest rates went through the roof. I could have bought a house and done all the things I should have done, and had a mortgage, and it would have pushed me right to the limit of my budget and being controlled again by money. So actually I took the choice of, okay, I'm gonna continue renting. It means I live in a beautiful creekside house. And it gives me the freedom to go and create money in a very creative way rather than I've got to. And if things need to change, the benefit of renting is I can change it quite quickly. So I'm still experimenting with what's my sweet spot around financial control, or financial management, if you like. And that's kind of fun. I'm kind of quite enjoying it, which again is, I think, something that I'm sure you bring to the work that you do is, we can make money really serious and heavy and fearful, or we can have fun with it, make it fun.
And I think so the concept of money and fun is very difficult to get to, I think. And I think that is all around habits. And it's really interesting when you think about the way that you're saying that you're shifting from like that extremity that we could call a scarcity mindset, but is all focused on security and ensuring you've got everything that you need, and scarcity that you might not. And then the other extreme is, spontaneity, being completely carefree, not really tying all that together, and then can we merge somewhere in the middle? But I do think that a lot of people listening will be like, I mean, I can see that people could think money was fun because you could spend money and to get something really fun to do or experience, or an amazingly fun car. But I think the concept of putting money and fun together is quite uncomfortable for a lot of people, because we do tend to be on the other end, end of the extreme, really. But I think it's brilliant you've brought it up, because I think even if you just dabble your toe occasionally in that spontaneity pool, rather than being so heavy on the other side of planning and security, I think that it can bring a new lease of life to the way that you deal with things.
Absolutely. And I'm sharing my personal experience. If I'm working with people, that isn't necessarily what I would coach somebody in, because I'm going to meet them where they're at, right? However, what I do think is and we've talked about it before, is there is an element of, we can experiment with money. We can have fun with it in that way, and we can try different things. And you've talked a lot about habits. We build up these habits over our lifetime, which often aren't ours. They're generational, societal, cultural, etc. What sometimes can be fun, so this doesn't have to be fun as in you spend all your money, but what can be fun is you just change a habit slightly. And I do this a lot with people, so it's not just around money. It's like, if we have these habits that we can habitually show up, which means generally we're on default and we're almost sleepwalking because they're just so habitual. If we just disrupt one of them, it's a way, and it doesn't have to be a big one. It can just be that we disrupt just one little element and see what shifts when we do that. And see, like I say, run the experiment, see what shifts. We can then start to go, oh, okay, if I start shifting other areas of my life or other habits that I have, perhaps I'll get different results. So, for example, someone who's been very heavy on budgeting all their lives, they've never spent more than they've earned, they've never enjoyed money, it's always felt very heavy to them. If we just bring in a bit of spontaneity and fun to one element of it, right? What if you didn't budget something and just went and bought something, even if it was for £10, that you normally are so strict on every penny you spend, and you experienced joy, which is something, if I said to you, what, does joy feature in your life? And you go, no, not really, right? And then you suddenly find that by spending a very small amount outside of your normal habits or your normal budget brings you joy, you've now got something where you can go, okay, how do I bring more of that into my life? And for different people, that doesn't mean spending thousands, hundreds, millions or anything. It could just be spending £10. And that, I think, is the other thing, is it's like people, we live in a world of kind of extremes. People are like, you're either this or you're that, right? Or it's good or it's bad. It's like, actually, there's this bit in the middle where you can just play and try different things out and see what works for you. And some people will end up with a fun pot. So they still budget, but in that fun pot, they can be sponsored, right? But it still speaks to I need to know that I've got money to have fun with, and it's not going to eat into my rent money or my mortgage money. Well, that's one way of doing it. But then in the fun pot, you get to be as spontaneous as you want to be.
Yeah, the fun pot was something I was going to mention. In a more traditional cash flow forecasting planning meeting that we might have, we might call it their play pot or their fun pot, or like miscellaneous budget is one that I see quite often. I
Yeah.
can't tell you what I'm spending it on, but it feels good and it is what I want
Yeah.
to do. And that you need that leeway. But I think the concept, that's what's been great about modern banking apps actually, is that you can move money into pots which you can call whatever you like. So you could have
Yeah.
your play pot, you still have your holiday pot, you'd still have, your play pot isn't your holiday pot. It's quite that's brought a whole level of kind of self-management
Yeah.
in finance, which has been great to see. I think that's very exciting. While we're talking about that, then have you got something that you could share with us, which has been like, yeah, that joyful moment that has been facilitated clearly by some money,
Yeah.
whether it's £10 or £10,000, but something you can think of that you could share.
Well, I think one that's really apt, and you mentioned at the beginning, like the co-author of the book Journey of Riches, and my chapter in that is called Becoming an Angel, and that is about this exactly what we're talking about. So, I did both. It was fun and joyful and budgeted, right? So it combines all the things we've talked about. So it's perfect. So there is a gentleman called Steve Hardison who is known as the ultimate coach, and end of 2021, the book The Ultimate Coach, which had been written about him by his wife, came out, and I read the book and I was totally inspired. The book is designed to be read as a book about me. So although it's a book about Steve Hardison, the invitation from Steve is to read it as if it's for you. So really like reading it, and what's the gold that I hear? And this is a lot of the work I do whenever I'm sharing anything with people. I'm like, what do you hear in this for you? So anyone watching this podcast, it's not like this is about Gretchen and Rebecca talking. It's about you. What do you hear in what's being shared here that resonates? So I read this book, and Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach. So he's, top end coach, coaches for some of the best people in the world. And you can go and have what's called a be with session with him. So you fly to Arizona. So he doesn't go anywhere, right? You fly to Arizona and you have a 2-hour be with session with Steve Hardison, the ultimate coach. And because of my money stories and all the things that I'd been going on in my life, I looked at that, and there was a real intuitive, I'm going to have a be with session with Steve Hardison, right? Then there was all the kick in of, who do you think you are? You can't spend $10,000 going to Phoenix, Arizona, plus the air flight and all the other bits and pieces. And I really had to check in with that and go, no, I am going to go and do it. So I made a commitment that every day I was going to put aside in one of my apps with the little pots, right, that I'd learned about in financial planning that I'd done. And then, as you say, the banks caught up and went, oh, that's a really good system. So I said, right, I'm going to put away £10 a day into my pot, and it went automatically from my bank account, but consciously every day I was like, there's another £10 in the pot. So I started doing that, and I hadn't even actually worked out how long that would take me to get to $10,000, right? But I just put it in there and started building it up. A couple of things happened. I went to a couple of events. My resolve got stronger that I really wanted to do this, so I upped it to £50 a month. And this was all through my business, because he's a coach, I'm a coach. I was going there to learn more about being a coach and many other things. I have to read the chapters to find out about those. So I upped it to £50 a day. And then I got to the point where I looked at my little pot, my little spaces in my Starling Bank app, and it said £10,000 actually, and actually dollars. It's obviously less than that, but that's what I'd set as my target, £10,000, to allow a bit of leeway for other things. So suddenly I'm like, okay, I can go. So I then, booked the Be With session with Steve, and I kept saving to pay for the extra bits. And I made it an event. I made it a week. I went to Arizona for a week, went to Phoenix, I went to the Grand Canyon. I stayed, I did lots of other amazing things when I was there. And I had the most unbelievable Be With session, that the ROI, if we're talking financial, in my life has been exponential. The joy of going, the creation of being there with him, everything that's happened since, which I could spend another 2 hours telling you about all the magic and miracles that have been created. You said there in my introduction, I'm a self-proclaimed miracle maker. I created the miracle of going, and then the miracles that have been created from there. But I wanted to do it. Steve talks about commitment, creating a commitment, creating something that you're working towards. And then actually what happens is like a black hole that draws you towards that. So by creating that commitment and saving, so budgeting and being, consciously putting money away each day, guess what happened? I created everything I needed to be there. Financially, my business was the best year I'd ever had, right? Because every time I was showing up in every conversation, every interaction, every coaching, I was showing up with the intention of this is what I'm creating. So it created a whole pull towards it. And it was joyful, fun, exciting, something I'd never done before. And like I say, the ripples of that in my life, both financially in terms of how I am with money and how I am with my business and my life, is just exponential. And that's the other thing, when we make money fun and we think about how we can create it and we think about how we can spend it in a way that supports our life. For me, what I've learned to be true is then we create joy, happiness, love, create connections, and all sorts of things that we wouldn't necessarily have known at the beginning of that process. So for me, that's the best example I can tell you. And that was last. So I went last year, 2023, January 2023, and I cannot tell you the impact that has had on my life in so many ways since. Has life been all unicorns and pink sparkles? No, right? Because life doesn't happen like that. Life will keep coming at us, and there'll be times when we have more money than we know what to do with, and there'll also be times when we don't. But what I've learned is, and one of the things that Steve talks about, and I've learned so much from him, not just in those 2 hours, but in all the time I've spent in and around his world and other people's worlds and what I'm creating for myself. One of his sayings is, I don't sweat the small stuff, even death. Because life will, it's a fact of life. We die. Money is a fact of our life right now. But if we don't treat it in the way that we sometimes count, with that energy of like power and control and all of those things, it can become fun. And we get to create it any way we like. And that's what one of the things that trip taught me. So long answer to a short question.
No, and it leads us quite nicely on, I think, to my last question, because we're almost out of time, which is about financial freedom. So everyone's answer is, I'm always blown away by everyone's answers being so different. But yeah, what does a financial freedom mean to you or feel like to you?
It's a good question. Financial freedom to me looks very different to what I thought it would. Obviously coming out of a marriage and going through a divorce, I'm now completely financially independent. So there's no money exchanged either way. And so freedom to me now is the freedom of that. And the freedom for me is that I get to create it. One of the things, I mentioned it then just in the story there, is that I now see myself as a very powerful creator, and money is just one thing that I can create. So freedom to me is the freedom to choose, do I want to create money, or do I want to create time? Do I want to create fantastic experiences, or do I want to create a secure future? And I'm not saying that any of those are wrong or right. It's the freedom for me to see finances, as I see everything else, as a choice, and that I get to create it any which way I like. And I believe that for everyone. So that's not just like there's something special about me. I believe that all of us have that freedom within us. There might be some work to do clearing out some of the old stories and stuff, which is the work that you do as well, to have that. But allow financial freedom to be exactly what you want it to be. And change it, right? Financial freedom to me a year ago looks very different to financial freedom for me now. So I get to choose it every day, and I get to change it if I want to. So that for me is that it's choice. It's a freedom to choose and create financial freedom in any which way I want.
Thank you very much. I really, really enjoy the answer to that. I think it will resonate with a lot of people. And I loved what you said about halfway through, which was like, this isn't about a conversation about between you and I necessarily about that people need, but it's hopefully it can trigger things that other people need to think about, which is the whole point of this podcast. Is does it just get you thinking about it, talking about it? Do you ask these questions to like your best mate next time that you're sat having a drink, and just think about that and open up the conversation around money being just such a a really, really difficult conversation to have. And I think, oh, there's so much of what you said today, but again, if we can flip it up and we can go, hang on, could it be fun, or could I do this? It opens up that conversation a lot easier than it being such a serious matter, which, you know, we have to have serious talks about money as well. But I think there's finding that balance is the joy of, is where it can become joyful.
Yeah. And, you know, if we think we're going to have a joyful conversation, a fun, creative conversation, we're more likely to have it. As soon as we can't start saying it's difficult and serious and awkward and all those things, then, yeah, it's not going to be very appealing. So shows like this, where you're making it a topic for conversation with people and all their different experiences of it. So it's not like you have to follow one, it's not one way of doing it. It's listening to lots of different people and hearing what resonates with you, and then go and have those conversations, either with an expert like Gretchen or your friends or a coach or whoever, but just go and have those conversations from that place of it could be fun. It could be fun, it could be creative, could be really, really interesting. So that, I think it's, and I love these podcasts because that's what it invites people to do, and just listen to people's stories. And that's how we learn, through people's stories. We have done for millennia. So the more we can share our stories, the more people will learn from us and choose what's right for them.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and you've added a lot, I know, to the podcast. And as I say, people will just listen and learn and develop their own skills. And I think that's just my aim of the podcast. So thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you.